Hey guys, it's me, Miss Baines. We are back for another episode of Teachers Talk because, yes, teachers talk. High school teachers to preschool teachers, admin to middle school teachers, we all share ideas and the things that are working and that are not working so well. So, on today's episode, we have Mr. Andrew Snyder joining us. He is going to talk about technology in the high school classroom, how that went pre COVID, post COVID, all that in between. So stay tuned. Welcome to our very first podcast. This is Teachers Talk. Today we have Mr. Andrew Snyder with us to talk about technology in the high school classroom. Thank you for being with us today. So, how long did you teach in the high school classroom?
So I taught English in the high school for about 6 years,
Okay.
freshmen all the way up to seniors.
Okay. So, was that pre COVID, post COVID, all the way through it? How did that work?
It was both. I had let's see, COVID was what 2020. So I started in 2016, fall of 16. So I had a couple years before COVID, and then a couple years after, and
Okay.
then the wonderful year during.
Okay. All right. So how was that year during COVID?
It was hit or miss. I think one of the hardest things for COVID was just having to do hybrid. Of course, with hindsight being what it is, it would have been a lot nicer to maybe have them all there, or to do something with the kids that wanted to stay home, which was perfectly fine. You know, that's their prerogative; they have every right to do that. But maybe some kind of online version for them, because I do think
Right.
we failed them in a certain degree, because it was really hard to work with the kids that were in the room while then also having to turn to the camera, and it was just, and then you kept getting conflicting reports. I don't know how Sullivan County did it, but when I was in Bristol, the first was they can have their cameras on or off, it didn't matter, and then it
Right.
was no, they need to have their cameras on. Well, no, they need to have their cameras on. It was, and then it just became, you kept getting conflicting reports and conflicting rules, and so that
Right.
added to the stress level.
Right. Well, and those, just my students, 4 and 5 year olds need those clear expectations. Those high school students need those clear expectations and boundaries. But unfortunately, we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into until we dove into it. And then it's like, oh, here's a problem. Here's a problem. How are we going to fix that? And we just
Precisely,
kind of
yeah.
rolled with it.
Educators can get it done, but
Yeah.
it's tough.
Absolutely. So, what apps or programs did you use pre, post COVID, whatever you want to talk about, for whole group instruction?
Um, One of the ones that I really liked was, it's called Nearpod. I don't know if you've ever
Okay.
used that, but it's a it's a presentation tool that allows me to do like live presentations with the kids. So, for example, they can follow along on their computer while I would control it either on my phone or on an iPad.
Okay.
And I could do things like, if I wanted to have a formative assessment where we might have been talking about something. Let's use like a character from a book. Um, Everyone knows Romeo and Juliet, so we'll just use
Right.
that. So let's say I'm doing Romeo and Juliet, and then I said, in this particular passage, Romeo is described. So using what's in the text, draw a picture of them, and I could throw up this formative assessment where they could all get on their computer that they're following along on and draw a picture of Romeo and submit it, and I could share it, and we could talk about it.
Okay.
And
So
then
you
you could,
could
like,
share that like in real time.
yeah, in real time. Yeah, it was really neat. Yeah, it was really cool. Nearpod's a lot. I really recommend Nearpod, especially if you have to do some kind of lecture, because you can do
Okay.
like polls, drawings. You can ask open-ended questions, or you can have just basic slides like a PowerPoint.
Okay.
And of course, Kahoot. I feel like everybody's used Kahoot.
Yes.
Quizzes, I've used that, and then
Okay.
Quizlet, I've used that before. So,
So could you, I'm trying to remember Kahoot. It's been a really long time, but could you have used that in a virtual learning format?
um,
where everybody signs in at the same time from different places?
That I think so. That's a good question. I never did.
Okay.
Only because I always used it just as like little 10-question quizzes, and I feel like they had to see my screen because they had to be able to see the uh-oh, sorry. Parked out front. We need to move your vehicle. White Camaro out front. You need to move your vehicle. Or else you're gonna get towed. No. But anyway, to answer your question, I always use it as like a quiz. I never
Okay.
used it as a presentation tool, so I don't know if I could quiz somebody from like. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think you can, but I at the
Okay.
time I never used it that way.
We'll have to get on there and find
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
That'll be a follow-up to this podcast. Get on there and see if you can do it from different um, hosts and different computers in your homes. So, what about programs for data? Because our teacher's most favorite thing to do in the world is data. So,
Mhm.
how did you organize your data in your classroom?
Oh man. So we used this thing called we used Power Test at one point, and then it became, and I cannot think of the word, but again, it was an E. And it was basically we used it mostly for benchmarks, but you could create tests as well. And that is how we would do most of our data. The biggest one was Power Test. We would use that a lot. And you could create exams and passages through there, and they were supposed to be very close, if not super close to the 10 ready exam. And so it would
Okay.
spout out data, and you could base it on standards and do like standard item analysis and things like that. And then that would kind of drive instruction. But of course, like Kahoot, that provides data. Quizlet provides data. So those little formative assessments still provide like if, uh, for example, one thing we would do with Kahoot or quizzes is if I gave a question on like again Romeo and Juliet 10 question and everybody like 90% of the class missed question 5, then we would spend some time and review question 5.
Right.
Um, but a lot of times it was mostly that power test, and I wish I could think of what that other testing format was, but
Yeah.
it was the same. It was similar to power test, but it was supposed to be more unique to Tennessee or something like that.
Okay, that's cool. So, do you remember a time when you collected data not using technology? Like, were you ever a pencil paper grading
Oh
the
yeah,
test, comparing them?
I liked my tests a lot. I liked Scantron tests a lot more.
Yeah.
So we would do in English. We were really heavy on the ACT because we thought that was more valid and that was more beneficial to our students.
Right.
And so we would give pre-test and post-test. So our pre-test we would give it on like the second day of school, and it would be an actual ACT English exam, 75 questions, and then we would give the same one around midterm to see how our kids had grown. And then every week we would give these 15 question ACTs over like material we would review, because every day our bell ringer would be an ACT question or
Okay.
two, sometimes two, and we would group them by content, not necessarily question. So like for example, a lot of the ACT is about redundancy. So we would do a week on redundancy and talk about redundancy and have them take questions practicing redundancy. And then at the end of the week, we would use those little scantrons to see where we're at and if we needed to reteach and all that. And
Okay.
as of when I was there, I don't know if it's changed, but I'm pretty sure like the ACT scores have always been really strong, especially in English at
Right.
Tennessee High. So
Yeah, for sure. I do. I remember doing those Scantrons too.
yeah.
So, the kids that we're having now, I think it's just long gone. I'm not sure, but I think it's long gone. Um, all right. So I think we've got one more question.
Mhm.
How did the switch to online learning change education for students and teachers after returning home from the shutdown? So I think we talked about this a little bit before, but even just those virtual school days, I know that our systems are adding into the calendar now. I don't personally like them. I have a child who's 16, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just a good mom or a mean mom, but I'm always like, you don't have to go on those optional days. You can do it at home. But then I wonder, okay, is he missing out on live instruction? if it's optional? What are your thoughts on that?
I think for me, you know, one of the biggest changes is that it kind of showed. I feel like it showed that we don't have the infrastructure in place for online learning to truly succeed. And what I mean by that is, you have students who don't have Wi-Fi or they have very poor Wi-Fi. You have school districts who have some schools. I mean, it varies by school. Some schools have robust, strong Wi-Fi infrastructure. Some don't. And so it showed that we really needed to get on the ball with that. Because what's going to happen if another bug hits that's a lot worse than COVID,
Right.
and the shutdown might be a little bit longer. So I think it showed that for one. I think the other thing that it changed is I think it showed that we don't necessarily have to rely on textbooks to get things done. I'm
Right.
not a huge textbook proponent, and I think that it allowed. I think one good that did come out from COVID that I fear the state is kind of forgetting was that teachers were able to have a little bit more freedom to do their job and have a
Right.
little bit more freedom to be trusted to make the right assignments, right assessments, and make their own content. And we were a lot more collaborative, I felt like, under COVID.
Right.
Whereas now I feel like there's this fear of giving freedom to teachers to do their job and trust the professionalism to make the right content. And I think that worries me a little bit. Because I saw there towards the end, amount administration, but when I was in the classroom, I could see this idea that we should be able to make our own content was slowly kind of being taken from us,
Right.
and that worries me. And I think a little bit of that has to do with, I think online showed that maybe we don't have everything in place that we need to have in place.
Right.
However, I do think one good thing that did come out of virtual learning that I would like to see us maybe think about going back to was the 4-day work week. I don't know how it
Absolutely.
was in Sullivan County, but in Bristol, when we had the hybrid, we would have like group A would come Monday, Tuesday, and then we would be off on Wednesday for deep cleaning.
Right.
And then Tuesday, Thursday, group B would come, but group A would stay at home and be the hybrid online. And so I thought my stress was a lot less then because that Wednesday I was able to get caught up on grading. I was able to plan a lot better. I had office hours, so I was able to work with kids. I didn't have a lot of kids join because they're high school kids, but still we had a few. And I thought that I would love to see that kind of be brought back in a way because I think a lot of like the mental health and stress that teachers deal with nowadays would kind of die down if we did that.
Absolutely. And I think that, as a teacher, when you feel supported, prepared, you have time to actually plan,
Oh yeah.
you're going to be a better teacher. Your kids are going to retain that information so much easier. And even in just doing an assignment and looking back at how I was planning my virtual lessons when I was at Head Start, we had an opportunity to provide every family with a hotspot and an iPad. I mean, they wanted for nothing, which was amazing. But still, even planning ahead to drop off materials. That's what we did on that day that we had. We were planning driving materials to the students' houses along with food and clothing and things like that. But just all of the extra planning that goes into that virtual,
Yeah.
it's just until you sit down to do it, there's no way to explain it and all of the thought and the effort that goes into that. So that was it's not something that I'm going to miss,
No.
especially, I mean, and it's different between high school students and kindergarten age students. Just
Right.
being able to log on and look eye to eye is a big deal for 5-year-olds. Sometimes high school students, but it's not for lack of knowing what to do. We'll just say that. So, but yeah, I will let you go. Thank you so much for joining and taking your
Absolutely. Thank you
time.
for having me.
All right. Well, you have a good afternoon. We'll see you next time.
Well, thank you. Bye.